Good morning, kids. I have coffee, which today is a good thing. You know, yesterday, my first day back, and I was driving home until almost 3 a.m. I was so out of it. I was incredibly out of it yesterday. So today, my first day with decent sleep, but I still feel kind of. But you're always going to feel that way to some degree, aren't you? Maybe not. All right, let's get this stuff fired up. Having recording issues already. So today's headlines, both very worrisome. Well, that's probably a takeaway. When I put the show together for today, I didn't think about this. Another takeaway. That's a good idea. I have a good idea once a week. All right, let's see if I could get the volume right. All right. And this will be Thursday's show, unless something drastic happens. All right, here we go. It's morning and we're talking money. Put those two things together, you know what you've got. Money in the morning. Hey, everybody. I'm Joe Saul-Sehy, Average Joe Money on Twitter. And in today's two headline, as usual, show, Sears with some news, maybe selling off one of their brands. We'll talk about what that has to do with your money. And in the NFL saga coming up called the NFL Draft, one general manager may be taking issue with one of the draftees. We'll talk about what that might have to do with your money also on today's show. Today's show brought to you by The Stacker. And man, we have big news in The Stacker this week. The Stacker is our nearly once a week newsletter that goes out, always free, stackingbenjamins.com/stacker. Unsubscribe anytime you want. But my mom, she puts hers on the fridge every week. That shows you how good it is. So sign up today and enjoy. All right, we got headlines, so let's get this party started.
Hello, darlings. And now it's time for your favorite part of the show, our Stacking Benjamin's headlines.
I remember when I was a kid, we would go to Sears because you bought Kenmore stuff, right? You just went and bought Kenmore stuff. And today, maybe that's all changing. This from USA Today and Sharice Jones. Will selling Kenmore save Sears? Experts say it's a long shot. A proposal to sell Sears' lucrative Kenmore brand may be a good financial move for the company's CEO, but it's unlikely to buy much time for the beleaguered chain, industry watchers say. Kenmore, known for its range of home appliances from refrigerators to washing machines, is just one of Sears' assets that CEO Edward Lamper expressed an interest in acquiring through his hedge fund, ESL Investments. He's also eyeing the home services division. Selling them, Lampert said, quote, will provide an important source of liquidity for Sears and help it, quote, to complete its transformation to respond to the challenging retail environment. But a key factor in Sears' slowing sales has been its fraying stores and a collection of merchandise that many shoppers feel they can get at a lower price or better quality elsewhere. Industry watchers doubt the extra funds from the spinoff assets will be invested to change that. Quote, the proceeds from asset sales have always been used to pay interest and to keep the company operationally solvent, says Neil Saunders, managing director of retail consultancy Global Data. They've not been used to invest in the company and make it profitable. Losing Kenmore and Home Services, two of Sears' most popular assets, would also mean that there'd be even fewer reasons that customers would want to shop at one of Sears' department stores, further imperiling the chance of survival. So this is an interesting story, isn't it? Sears talking about selling off one of their main product lines, and to who? To their own CEO. So their CEO purchases Kenmore, which most people say is a good move for him. It clearly is a good move for him. And when you look at moves like this, you say to yourself, okay, is this saving Sears? Is this the move that Eddie Lampert makes to save Sears? And if you look at all the moves Sears has made from the beginning of the downfall to now, you just can't see this as a move that saves Sears. They've made so many bad moves in a row. And I think that the only reason now I'd walk into a Sears, Sears doesn't have Kenmore. What does Sears have anymore? What is it? Does Sears have Craftsman anymore? I don't even know if Sears has, or is that what they're talking about with the other division? Sears. What is Sears? Why would I go to a Sears? I completely agree with the article. And what's funny is that when I see pieces like this, I think about running a business, and I think about the importance of public relations in that business, right? So does the liquidity that you get from selling off one of your main brands, Kenmore, after a long, slow march toward death that Sears has had the last, how many years? 10 years, 15 years? After this long, slow march, now you're selling off one of your main brands. That negative publicity, does that kind of offset the liquidity that you would get? I would think that it would. And you see people invest in brands like a Sears. So what does this have to do with your money? Well, number one, if you're selling a business, the PR thing that I talked about, if you're running a business, if you're self-employed, remember the public relations game. But number two is that people will invest in these turnaround stories. And yet when you go from the beginning of the turnaround story to the inevitable end of the turnaround story, the turnaround often doesn't happen the way you want. It's far easier and far better strategy, if you're buying individual stocks, especially, to invest in either the leader or the number two, right? Be number one or number two, or don't compete. And you see a lot of CEOs say that. Jack Welch famously in the 1990s said that about General Electric. You also see a lot of investors that say that. Stick with the leaders. Don't get involved in turnaround stories. Sears selling Kenmore, for most of us, should be a non-issue. Also, if you're investing in index funds, right? That this kind of stuff takes care of itself. As companies get smaller, as they shrink their way to the bottom, what you find is indexes like the S&P 500, they wash out of the S&P 500, and you don't have to do anything. Which, by the way, is a bias. I was talking to an investor recently saying that indexes like the Dow Jones or indexes like the S&P 500 are designed to go up over time, because if a company's failing, it will exit the index and they'll replace it with a company that's a bigger name. Like when Apple entered the S&P 500. I mean, imagine now Apple streaked its way to the top over a number of years. But when you look at the 500 biggest companies in America, those are going to wash out companies that aren't doing well, and you don't have to clean the portfolio very much. One of the problems I saw when I was a financial planner was I'd see these gardens, right? These portfolios that weren't weeded. And it ended up being my job to help them kind of weed the garden. Well, if you stick with indexes, you don't have to worry about weeding. All right, that's our first headline. Say a quick hello to all our friends watching live here on Facebook. We do these live without a net on Facebook, and man, is it intimidating. And today, a very quiet day in the chat room. So we'll just say hello to all of you and get back to our second headline, which is a headline from the NFL. You don't see this much in our show or when people talk about money. But I think, we talk about money, earning money is a big piece of the plan, right? We talk about how to take care of money once you earn it. But there were many people that I met with when I was a financial planner that it was an income problem. You talk to people and they are scraping by, they're clipping coupons, they're doing everything right with the budget and you say to yourself, how can I help them? And you realize this is just an income problem. They need to make more money or, there's always the two biggest expenses that people have. Expense number one is your home. Expense number two is your car. So without making those ugly decisions, a lot of the time it's an income problem. But here's something that might affect somebody's income. This is from thescore.com. I think it's our first time getting a headline from here. This is written by Esther McLaren. Chargers general manager seemingly doesn't appreciate Mayfield not prioritizing interview. What's this about? Well, the Chargers, for those of you that are not sports fans, they're an NFL, National Football League franchise in San Diego. A candidate to be selected number 1 overall in the draft on Thursday, Baker Mayfield seems to have made a negative impact in his pre-draft interview with the Los Angeles Chargers. Excuse me, I said San Diego. San Diego is where they used to be, isn't it? The Los Angeles Chargers, who won the number 17 selection. Mayfield admitted last week to a lack of preparation for the interview, saying, quote, I didn't look at the Chargers playbook as much as I should have. It could have gone a little bit better, but at the same time, I'm prioritizing which playbooks I'm going to learn. No offense to them, but I've got a lot on my plate, according to Dan Wolke of the Los Angeles Times. Chargers general manager Tom Telesco got his chance to respond on Monday, and he's apparently not letting Mayfield off the hook for his busy schedule. Quote, I'm probably not prepared to comment on that. My plate's pretty full. No offense, Dan, Telesco told Wolke. It remains to be seen how the Cleveland Browns, New York Giants, New York Jets, the other quarterback-hungry teams picking at the top of the draft feel about Mayfield's treatment of the Chargers. It's funny. So the Chargers are drafting late on Thursday, if you're listening to this today. So the Chargers drafting late, and Mayfield thinks he's being taken ahead of time. So he says something that's apparently pretty flippant. The bad news about this, by the way, is that Mayfield is already a player who, if you don't know this University of Oklahoma quarterback, he has a history of saying things that things come out of his mouth that maybe he shouldn't say. He has a history of kind of being a little bit hyper. He's a guy that when it comes to the whole public relations thing, it seems to have maybe gotten beyond him. Yet, when you say stuff, you got to realize the world's watching. I can't believe some of the things I see people say on Facebook, right? Or I see people say on Twitter. And I think to myself, and it's fine to take a stand on items that you care about, but there are just some people who say just dramatic things. And I think somebody's going to see that later. Like somebody that is going to influence your ability to make money is going to see that. So I'm not saying not to say stuff that's outlandish. Just realize that it could affect your paycheck. And that's the interesting piece at the end of this article. Clearly, Mayfield probably won't fall as far in the draft today that he's going to end up with the Chargers, right? But the way he handled that question, all the teams he might end up with saw that. There's a chance he might end up at the Chargers. And what if he gets down to the Chargers draft pick and he gets down to the Chargers draft pick and he's faced with the same general manager? I don't think that general manager is probably going that direction. Going to be a pretty awkward day. So remember, I think our takeaway here is to remember the world's watching, right? The world is watching. Hey, we're going to put these two together here in just a moment, but have to say one more word about the Stacker. Big announcement this week coming out of the basement. So excited about this. Can't tell you what it is here, but if you are somebody who gets our newsletter, The Stacker, you'll know exactly what it is. StackyBenjamins.com/Stacker. This week, we announced a big, well, I think it's a big thing. Next week, we also plan to announce another big thing. We've got 5 different announcements coming up that are exciting to me. But more than that, I think what people really want is they want to know how to think about their money. And if you want our commentary in writing about your money, head to StackyBenjamins.com/Stacker. All right. So we take these 2 headlines at the end of every show and we put them together in a big idea. And what's today's big idea? Well, let's start at the top. We have Kenmore being sold. by Sears. And I think the little takeaway there is focus on your core assets. Second, the Chargers in the draft don't really appreciate what this draftee quarterback says in an interview. And the takeaway there is that the world is watching. And I think the big thing to look at is understanding the difference between assets and liabilities, right? The things that Mayfield said in this interview are clearly going to be a liability. And the thing going on in Sears, in the Sears realm with Kenmore is an asset. And Sears very flippantly selling an asset, and Mr. Mayfield very flippantly creating a liability for himself. And our old friend Greg McFarland over at Control Your Cash, he doesn't really write there anymore, but he has a great book called Control Your Cash. Control Your Cash, he talks about accumulating assets and selling liabilities. And these companies are getting it wrong. These companies, company on one end with Sears, and then Mr. Mayfield on the other with the draft, very flippantly doing exactly the opposite. And when you collect assets, the cool thing about collecting assets is they continue to grow in value, right? Liability is exactly what it says it is. It's a liability. It's going to hurt you later on. And so we were looking at the sale of assets becomes what could be a liability for Sears. They don't have any brands anymore because they sold off their asset. And if Mr. Mayfield falls in the draft, he could see that what he said becomes a real liability for himself. So that's today's show. Thanks a lot, everybody, for hanging out with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Go stack some Benjamins. Bye-bye.
Money in the Morning is created by Joe Saul-Sehy and is brought to our channels by our producer and engineer, Richie Rutter-Reese. Stacking Benjamins and Money in the Morning are for entertainment purposes. Before making moves, consult with your financial advisor. Looking for training sessions? Kathleen Sellemans has a great suite of Stacking Benjamins tools, so head on over to learn.stackingbenjamins.com. Hoping to chat with us on the web? Say hello to Shannon Cowan, our social media guru and community manager in our Facebook group. She can be found at stackingbenjamins.com/basement. From the basement, I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. See you tomorrow.
All right, we did it. Man, that was fun. One of my favorite parts of the day. I saw that Chargers thing, and I love talking about earning money and about public relations, because I can't believe, and I get that these guys are 18, 19 years old, but you think that some public relations training, I'll tell you one of the best things, one of the best, I don't know, what would you call it, a class? When I was with American Express, I was fortunate enough to do media training, and it was very hard. It was so very hard, because there are often things that you want to say, but you have to think first, right? You have to think, what's the long-term impact? And I still, even after media training, I got in trouble. I remember once on television, I talked about an interest rate on a money market fund. And then I realized that I was representing a big company, American Express, and a lot of advisors that were under that umbrella, a lot of the people I represented, number one, the rate wasn't right. Number two was the rate that I was quoting American Express's home product, their own product, even though we'd recommend other money markets, other places, wasn't paying that high. So it was not a good day. There was another time I was on stage and I cracked a joke, and it wasn't a great joke. It was absolutely horrible. So you got to use a filter. I cracked some joke about bikers. So, and I had bikers like in front of me, sitting right in the front row. People that talked about bikers' rights. I'm talking about people who drive motorcycles. And so I thought it was just an inane, idiotic, kind of funny joke, and not funny at all. Anyway, got to think. So I feel it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the draft with this guy, especially since he's known for not thinking before he talks. All right, guys, have a great day.